Luz, cámara, acción. Welcome to the Brown Perspective. I'm your host, Romero, and I'm here with my co-host, Eduardo. ¿Cómo estamos?
Buenos dias, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, like always.
I was gonna say, buenos días, super campeón.
Super. Oh, best soccer cartoon ever.
I was wondering if you had seen that as well. One of the
The
classics.
kick, the kicks lasted so long. They're
That
just
and
flying through the air.
And then when they would be running down the field, the camera was behind them and it looked like they were going up a hill.
Uh-huh.
You literally could not see the end of the the other side where the goalie where the goalpost was. Still though,
Yeah,
that's one of the all-time faves. They used to play it in the Spanish channel in Telemundo when I was a kid.
that's funny.
So, ¿cómo estamos?
Super
Super
campeón.
super campeón.
Pues
Supercharged.
aquí super inspirado, bueno, digamos que, it's been a while. So obviously Rona continues, although here in California and other parts of this country, things are starting to open up. I think there's starting to be this interesting debate as to how to open up and understanding that there's no vaccine and that we still need to protect ourselves. But I think for me this morning, I really wanted to see if we can talk a little bit about how this pandemic, this critical incident, has hopefully helped some of us connect, reflect, and part of that I think is has to deal with spirituality, whatever practice you have, and also how a time like this can impact creativity. Because I think that you're home, you're getting probably a little bit more time to do things that you didn't get a chance to. So I know there's a lot of musicians who are taking this opportunity to write songs, do concerts, and things like that. So yeah, so I just wanted to kind of today in this episode explore a little bit more about how each of us has dealt with this corona from that spiritual, creative uh, level, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, that sounds good. Um, we you're talking about those people that have time though to begin with, right? So we're excluding
That's
all the
true.
parents with kids that have absolutely no time on their hands.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because it's crazy for them. We talked about this the other time when where some parents getting up at 6 and then working all the way through 11 because they have to combine work and then teaching, tutoring the kids, cooking for them, and then dealing with their partner, whether it be a wife or a husband or just a partner.
It ain't easy, but tell me how have you guys managed that so far with your little baby boy?
Well, it's not that difficult for us because he's not in school, so we don't
Mm-hmm.
have to worry about that. That part didn't change because we're still able to keep our babysitter and she still helps us. And because both of us are working from home, we haven't really been affected. Now, if my wife's job, my wife's job announced layoffs last week and
Mm.
percentage cuts because a lot of companies have been doing that. And
Yeah.
for a brief moment there, she was thinking that she was gonna get laid off as well because she's in the healthcare industry. But I told her, there's you guys are the critical staff. They're not gonna lay off the critical ones. They're probably gonna go for the administrative overhead. And yeah, that's what they did. But for a brief second there, she was already contemplating. Well, if I get laid off, then what does that mean for our babysitter? Are we gonna keep the babysitter? Are we gonna reduce her hours? And then that's you, it gets that's the lesson from this coronavirus that it can turn on you really fast. You can go from being in a
Mm-hmm.
comfortable situation to all of a sudden, crap. I lost my job. Now, what does that mean? Though, if I don't have the babysitter, then yeah, then even with the baby, with the 2-year-old, even taking care of them all day is tough, right?
Yeah.
So then that, yeah. So for
No.
us, like nothing much has changed, thankfully. How about for
Mm-hmm.
yourself?
And let me ask you this. Well, from my perspective, I think that where we are in our lives, because so much about life is how you react to things, right? So we really can't help what happens to us in many instances. Like, for instance, this corona, I don't think none of us could have prevented this from happening. It's happening, and part of it is how do we react to it? And again, acknowledging that we are all reacting from different places. Some are really uh, reacting from an insecure place in terms of finances, jobs, and other things. And then some people who are, a little bit more privileged and have that. But to your point, that can change in a dime given what's going on. And I think in times like that, oftentimes that reaction is informed by your own spirituality, your perspective, right? And I think some people confront challenges and situations differently. And I guess my theory is that a lot of how you react to something is based on your foundational values and beliefs. So I'm wondering from your perspective, how have you has that been something that you've um, encountered during this pandemic? Like, have you found yourself to be a little bit more meditative, reflectioning, or how has it been for you?
Mm, not really.
Okay.
I'm trying to put it in a. I'm trying to put it in a way that is not that is not like a just an abrupt uh, stop to the train of thought that what you're going in. I know what you're getting at, and let me explain why I say no for me because I'm just I'm not that spiritual to begin with. You know,
No.
I'm not religious and I'm not as spiritual, but that doesn't mean that I don't that there aren't specific strategies that I adopt to deal with things. They're just not
Mhm.
spiritual. They're more based on like logic and anticipating outcomes.
Mhm.
So yeah, I have had to. I wouldn't say I have had to turn to it, but because I'm usually always working in that mode,
Mhm.
then I think easing into this coronavirus transition hasn't been that difficult for me. Because first of all, I don't mind the solitude. I don't mind
Mhm.
working from home. So that part didn't change for me. And then even I was telling you yesterday about the situation with my wife where she may lose her job. I don't want to I don't want to paint her in a way that where she was freaking out or anything because she's not here to defend herself. But you know, most rational people would be
Yeah.
concerned about the
Some
fact that
anxiety
you're
for
losing a
sure.
job, right? So there's anxiety. So she was expressing that anxiety, and she was already thinking worst case scenario. I lose my
Mhm.
job. What are we gonna do? She was like, "Are we gonna? We're gonna have to fire your tia because my tia is my babysitter." She said, "We're gonna have to fire your tia," and then she said, "We're gonna have to move back to the garage."
Go back with the parents.
Yeah, exactly. So I know that part of it was just her humor, the way that she deals with that anxiety. So a lot of what she was
Mhm.
vocalizing wasn't really. It's not that she meant it, but she goes down that path where she starts uh, processing it that way. But I told her, I said, first of all, I told her, hey, don't tell my aunt because you're gonna freak her out. And
Mhm.
I said, we're not gonna let her go even if you lose your job. I said, we'll be
Yeah.
fine. We'll keep
We'll
her
cut.
because we
We'll
need
cut
her.
other expenses.
Exactly. I said, see, the thing is, in a way, I'm always ready to go back to zero if I need to. And
Mhm.
having that as a foundation for how you carry yourself in life is very stabilizing
Mhm.
because if you come from very little, then for me it's not that hard to go back to that. Now
Mhm.
here's the difference though. So here's the thing I feel like we can talk a little bit more about if you want to explore this a little bit more. To what extent am I just using that as a strategy to fool myself
Mhm.
into telling myself that I can go back to zero at any moment and I would be okay with it? Um, I don't know. I've questioned that myself before, but if the strategy works, I keep using it
Yeah.
because it allows me to stay really composed. Like my job had layoffs too. My job has had 3 rounds of layoffs, and I'm still there. And my company actually started laying off even before coronavirus. We had 2 rounds of layoffs before coronavirus. The
Mhm.
third one was the one that really cut in deep because it was as a result of the significant downturn in industry as a result of the coronavirus.
Mhm.
But all throughout those layoffs, I said, hey, whatever. If I had a pretty good sense that I wasn't going to be affected, but at the same time, I always tell myself, well, just prepare for the worst, just in case. I I,
Yeah.
I think my operating principle in life is it's not spiritual, like I told you, but it's it's always consider the possibilities, and don't be afraid of the worst case scenario. Like go to the worst case scenario. Don't be afraid of contemplating what that may be, and then ask yourself if you'd be okay with it. And for the most part, I'm usually fine with it, because if I lose my job, then that just means I have to I have to start looking for another one, right?
Hmm.
Obviously, but I'm not afraid of um of doing the hard work that it's gonna require to get another job. Maybe this is something that I'll just mention as well. I think when I was in college, and this gives you a sense of how I operate as well. When I was in college, um, I wouldn't really freak out a lot uh, about assignments, or being backed up a little bit for an exam or for an assignment, because I always had this way of rationalizing. I said, okay, I'm behind and something's due tomorrow. Uh, what does that mean? Oh, it just means I have to stay up all night and study. So
Hmm.
what I essentially was doing was a trade off. I was preserving my peace of mind at the expense of sleep,
Hmm.
and it's not a good trade off actually when you're doing that, because you should value your sleep.
Yeah.
But even back then, my emphasis was always on, I'm not gonna freak out.
Yeah.
I'm going to just sacrifice a few hours, not sleep. And I do the same thing about sacrificing in terms of work. Like if I have to work harder at something, it doesn't affect me, because it just means hard work, and I can do hard work. Like even if it's physical work, I can do that. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Of course.
I'm gonna close this door.
Y este comercial es patrocinado por Corona. Si su suegra es una joya, aquí le tenemos la corona. No,
So
that makes sense. But I was gonna say that from my perspective, I think your ability to go to zero and your logic, it in some ways is the spiritual equivalent of detachment, right? So you're not attached to whatever you have now. I mean, you like what you have, but you realize that even if you lose it, you'll still be able to work towards regaining it, towards towards building that back up. So your happiness and your sense of well-being is not tied to the possession of that. So I think in some ways as a grounding principle and spirituality, right? So if you think about some of the, and I guess I'll tell a little bit about my
yeah.
own spiritual and religious background. So I mean, I grew up super Catholic. I was an altar boy. At some point, I thought I was going to be a San Franciscan friar because that was kind of the one of the only career options that I saw in front of me. But then, once I moved to the States, sort of soccer became my religion.
Yeah.
But still, obviously, being Catholics, there's a cultural piece of it. But then I connected more with spiritual practices, like I was introduced to the I Ching, sort of that Oriental philosophy, and then
Mm-hmm.
I was introduced to Native American practices like sweat lodges, and then recently I've been introduced to meditation, breath work, as ways to just continue that spiritual growth. So, but when you look at saints, when you look at San Francis of Assisi, like one of the reasons why he's a saint was because he was well off. He decided to sacrifice, to give it all up, to work with the poor, and then eventually, he was attributed some miracles, so became a saint. And
Mm-hmm.
similar to Mother Teresa, right? So much of when you think of a person who's a saint, a lot of it has to do with just being able to let go of that material possessions and just be and just trust that you'll be able to get by with whatever means are with the community or just without having to worry about money and all these things.
Yeah, and you can even extend that to include yourself as a material possession. your body,
Yeah.
because it is just that, and you have it for a while, and then you're gonna lose it. And how do you feel about losing that, right? But uh, yeah, you're. I think you're right. I think you're right on the money. I don't want to get into the whole um, discussion about death, because that also factors into how your perspective on life. But if we just focus on the material possessions, I'm thinking about it because just like everything else, nothing is ever black and white. There's a lot of shades in there, and that's why earlier I mentioned, to what extent is this something that you can tell yourself and believe it and build a reality around that versus the
Hmm.
actual reality, like the actual reaction of how you would react. For example, I could sit here all day and say one of the reasons why I think I have low stress levels is because I don't have this attachment to material possessions, and I can go back to zero. But then when my wife and I took a trip to Honduras 3 years ago, I left my cell phone in the cab that took us home after we were out eating dinner. And when I realized that I had lost my phone, I freaked out. And luckily, I had the guy's number, right?
Wow.
But he dropped us off at 2 a.m. And I called him immediately, and he didn't answer. And so I left him like two voice messages. And then I couldn't sleep. And then at like 5 a.m., I figured, well, we were probably his last fare. So I just need to
Hmm.
catch him in the morning before he picks up somebody else. Because the minute he picks up somebody else, chances
They're
are
gonna
that
keep
cell
it.
phone is gone, because they'll sit in the back, they'll see it. And it was in the pocket the door handle where your hand goes in to open the
Oh,
door.
got it.
That's where it was. So I called him at 5:36. He wasn't answering, so I left him like another message. And luckily, he did call me back at 6:30. But that whole time, it was agonizing because I was
Wow.
I was mad at myself for being so stupid to have left the phone there. And I just kept repeating over and over in my head. I was like, "Well, why did you do that? Why did you forget?"
Or do you remember why? So obviously the phone nowadays, there's so much information is not just a way to communicate, but has so much information. But do you remember why you felt
Yeah,
so upset?
yeah, because first of all, you're losing like 2 years worth of pictures that you haven't backed up if you don't automatically
Oh,
back them up to the cloud. And then I have my email there, and I have like your bank account. So everything is protected with patterns, and everything's protected with passwords, even your phone. But you never know if somebody clever enough is gonna be able to get it and unlock it, and then they can at least go through your email. So I thought, okay, if I've lost it for sure, then I need to wipe it. It's like, oh crap, the battery died, so I can't
mm,
even remote wipe it. So it's like, fuck, unprepared. And the one thing that drives me crazy is the fact that I ended up in a situation that I wasn't prepared. So it's out of my control. I'm not a control freak, but I am very harsh on myself when it comes to these things. So that I think I feel like if the more I mull over it and the more I stress out about it at the time, the less likely it is that I'm gonna do it next time, right? So maybe that's
of
part of
course.
why I was doing that as well. And afterwards, what I started doing is I purchased a tether. Remember? Remember
You
it?
learned your lesson.
Yeah, it clips onto the hoop of the pants, and then it attaches to the phone. So you have your phone in your pocket, and then if you leave it somewhere, the tether stretches, and then it like pulls the phone towards you, and you realize that you're forgetting it somewhere. But so that's what I'm saying, that I can sit here all day and tell you that the strategy that I use is because I don't have an attachment to possessions. But I know that in reality there is some attachment. But I'm
Hmm.
able to successfully essentially lie to myself. And people
Hmm.
lie to themselves all the time. I use that as an advantage, because I'm not afraid to admit that I'm full of BS sometimes. But I don't do it for bad stuff. I don't say I'm full of BS and I'm gonna go sell cars that are worthless to some chump that I can sell it to him for for twice as much as it's worth. I'm
Hmm.
not full of that type of BS, but a lot of people are. But I am full of a lot of other BS in when people talk to me and I tell them what I think, or how it is that I operate. A lot of the time it's just stuff that I think it is, but I know in reality that it might not be the case. And I think for people that are close to me, sometimes I've seen that they've gotten into trouble by kind of following my advice or listening to what I say, because I say stuff that it sounds like it's true and it sounds like I believe it, but then I flip and I change my mind really fast. And I'll give you a perfect example. When I was in college, I had no clue what I wanted to do after college. I didn't know if which jobs I was going to apply to. I
Hmm.
didn't have any prospects. I wasn't looking, and part of it was I was too busy with classes. I couldn't really focus on looking for a job, and but I knew I had to get a job at some point. I was just like deferring that. But people would ask me, and it's like, hey, have you started looking for a job? Because everybody was interviewing, and everybody was that was the thing that everybody was doing. Because when you're wrapping up your senior year, usually some things start winding down, and you focus on job hunting. But I
Or
had like,
even some people are doing like in junior year, right? Because they done an internship or
mm-hmm,
they did something that sets them up for the
yeah,
for getting a job early in their senior year.
yeah. So I had four classes that I needed to finish to complete my major, and I didn't have any time for that. But so people would ask me, and one of my friends I remember asked me, "Hey, so what are you gonna do when you graduate? Do you have a job lined up?" And I said, "Nah, you know what? I'm just gonna take some time off. I'm gonna take 6 months off and just relax, because because I'm a little burned out from all this stuff, and that was true. I was a little burned out. I said, I'm just gonna
Hmm.
take some time off. I'm not gonna stress about it. I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm not even gonna look." And then all of a sudden, like a week after that, somebody recommended me to a to a Brown graduate was working at Bloomberg, and I think that person was doing recruiting at Brown, and somebody gave him my name, and he reached out to me, and he said if I was interested in doing an interview, and I said, yeah, I'll interview. So I went and interviewed, and I got the job, right? But
Amazing.
the other guy that I had told them that my philosophy was I'm just gonna relax because I'm this guy that's not gonna worry about a job and stuff. Well, he did that. he took
Oh
six
no.
he took 6 months off because he thought it sounded like a good idea. I just said that because I didn't have any clue what I was gonna do, and I at the time it sounded like, yeah, it sounds like it's something that I could do. But the way I communicated it, it sounded like that's exactly what I was gonna do.
So that's a warning for our listeners as you listen to our episodes. We take his advice with a grain of salt.
But see, that's the thing. Everybody's like that, though. Most of the people that you talk to when they tell you stuff, they think they believe that, but they don't actually. That's not really what they believe. Like when like Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan until they step in the ring. That's
Hmm.
why when you talk to other people, you should always be worried. You should always be cautious of what they're telling you, especially the people that claim to be a certain way. Oh, I'm this really proud guy. If somebody breaks my trust, then well, like the people like that, dude, I bet you even as they're saying it, there's probably already stuff that they have done that contradicts that, yet they still like
Hmm.
to say stuff like that. So whenever I hear people talking like that, when they're the people that are the most absolute, like absolutely sure about something, that's when I know it's like, yeah, probably not. I call BS on that. I don't tell them, but in my mind, I'm processing all that.
No, I agree with you. I think I have a natural distrust of people in the extremes and the absolutes because I like you, right? And there's a saying in Spanish and it might be a Colombian saying, but it says that, el peor azote del culo es la lengua. So the worst whip for your ass is your tongue. Because to your point, oftentimes people say, "Oh, I'm never gonna do this. I'm never gonna be like that. When
Uh huh.
I'm a parent, I'm gonna be this
Yeah.
way." And then all of a sudden that situation happens, and they're like, "Oh, no que no ibas a hacer esto." And so it changes. So that's something that I know it's out there. But I think as you were taking us back to graduation and getting ready for that special uh, milestone commencement in our lives, I do want a special shout out to any college grads or people who know college grads right now. We definitely need to support them because unfortunately, a lot of them are not going to get to experience that amazing experience of graduating, right? I know this weekend President Obama, I believe LeBron James, and a few other folks are going to do commencements online. They're going to do a virtual graduation to
Yeah.
help graduating seniors, both from high school and colleges, realize that this is while you don't get to do this, life goes on, and hopefully you'll continue to hit your milestones. But I know that right now there's a lot of people who are going to be missing out
Yeah,
on that
there's.
experience, and particularly first generation students like you and I,
Mhm.
which is it was so much work sacrifice not only on our part but on our parents and our loved ones to get us there, and for them not to be able to be there, I'm sure is going to be tough.
Yeah, you saw the reports of some of them celebrating their graduation on their front lawns.
Hmm.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
sucks.
I've seen some signs here in my neighborhood of people
Yeah.
congratulating the graduates, people who are getting into the armed services as well, like the service academies and all that stuff.
Yeah, they don't have any of that. Did they get at least? Did they at least get to enjoy prom though? The prom happens a few weeks or a few months before graduation. It's usually a few weeks, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it depends on the school. I think some schools may have, particularly since they tend to do like winter formals or winter bowls.
Yeah,
But I think probably a good portion of folks didn't. So
yeah.
yeah,
So they missed
it's a
out.
whole a lot of experiences
Yeah,
that
they
were
because
disrupted.
and because these are things that you look up to in high school, that you look forward to in high school, and they're once in a lifetime things. That they're not gonna happen again. Your prom is a once in a lifetime thing. Your graduation and whatever other senior activities they have. So yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world that could happen to you, because you could catch coronavirus while
Yeah.
you go through all that, but it's still pretty sucky for a 17, 18-year old to have to go through that, because if they're like me, they're gonna internalize it, and then they're gonna just it's just gonna be in their head forever and ever. I missed out. I missed out. I missed out on that. I missed out on that. That's a very dangerous, by the way. That's a very dangerous state of mind to be in, where you feel like you missed out on something.
Hmm.
Uh,
No,
but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead with what you were saying.
no. So I think it's a good point, like missing out. But the one thing that I was gonna say was also because when you're young, you have your time frame is so limited, right? Since you only lived 18 years, 22 years, your perspective on a long time is very skewed, right? So 6 months, a month is a long time, a year is a long time.
Yep.
So I think it's kind of, uh, reminding folks that there's perspective that yes, maybe this is one year, maybe 2 years that will be disrupted, but hopefully, you will be able to get back on track, or you will be able to do other things that will be important in your life, and that just what you're going through now doesn't mean that you're gonna have a bad life or anything like that. Maybe it'll be a little different. And yes, there's gonna be some very real financial financial implications and economic implications, but the reality is that you'll get through this.
Yeah, it's so hard to see that when you're 17, because like you
Yeah.
said, the way that you view the world at that age is very narrow, and even for, I mean, for most people, it's hard to look beyond a few years into the future and realize that with time, however you feel now, you're not gonna feel that way.
Hmm.
I mean, when I was that age, I thought that life ended at by the time you were 30. I thought no more fun. You're old. Life ends. So right. So I think I would have been devastated had that happened in high school and I wasn't able to enjoy some of those things. But of course, like everyone else, they'll get over it. It's just a sucky thing to go through, and this is when they start building those tools to
Hmm.
overcome those type of things. And a lot of these kids, they've probably overcome a lot of more significant things by the time they're in high school. So it really depends on how far you are in terms of already learning to deal with disappointment,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and I think coping mechanisms, right? Like how much you've had to cope with. And I know, um, realizing to your point, like how much other stuff you already have overcome or overcame is
Yeah.
so important to keep you grounded. Like, I'm a warrior. I've done this before. But
And
I think this also brings me to the topic of meditation, right? And going back to the conversation around spirituality.
mm-hmm.
And I think learning so much about that, a lot of what meditation is not necessarily controlling your thoughts and your emotions, but it's really about being aware of them, right? Like, and like, why do I feel sad? Why do I feel anxious? Or,
Mm-hmm.
this is how I'm feeling. And I think it's not necessarily that it's good or bad, but just being aware of, like right now, like I feel really sad,
Yeah.
and kind of processing those
But
things. So I know that
do you associate self-awareness with spirituality? Because I don't.
I do. You
Okay,
don't?
that's interesting. No, because
I
I'm always like I'm self-aware. I'm always analyzing that stuff, but I don't consider it to be spiritual.
Well, it's funny, and obviously you and I think I'm more of an emotive person. You obviously more logical, head-based person, and I think that's probably one of the reasons we get along so well. Because imagine if both of us were like, if we were the same, or but in any case, I think that
They always say that. In my mind, I think that two people that are exactly the same are probably even better able to get along.
we should test that out someday. Yeah, I agree. Because in some way there's alignment, right? And I think this goes into like relationships, why when they tell you to marry your best friend, I think the one and it's true. I think you want somebody that you're aligned with and that, they share some of the same values and I guess direction in life, understanding that things will change. But yeah, you make a good point. I think that being aligned and being similar, having similar thoughts, it's could be helpful
Well,
and
that
maybe
because
happier.
that's one of those absolute expressions that are completely meaningless to me because it doesn't mean anything. Like because people are so diverse, there's no way that you can say that opposites attract and that people that are the same don't get along. Okay, that may happen like 5% of the time or 10% of the time, but that's no different than anything else. So that's why when I hear
Mhm.
expressions like that, they're completely meaningless to me because I know that they're not grounded in any type of reality. If you wanted to actually like study every single human being and every single interaction and come up with a number that tells you, yeah, two people that are incredibly logical, we found out that 100% of the time they actually don't get along. They would have gotten along better had they been with the person that's the opposite of them. Like, we don't have
Mhm.
that data. And until I'm given that data that tells me 100%, when I hear stuff like that, I always take it with a grain of salt. I'm like, eh. That's how I think about that stuff.
That's funny. Well, that's why on the other hand, there's other fingers. So
And sorry, finish your thought because I did want to come back to something that because we kind of went on different paths. But go ahead and finish your thought, and then I'll bring it back to something that I was talking about earlier.
no, that I was gonna say that that yeah, I think that self-awareness to me it's important and it's a sign of both spiritual growth and also of I think your ability to be a leader within your own sector or your own space, right? Because I think you need to be self-aware. You need to be comfortable with knowing what you're good at, what you're not good at, what you're experiencing, what others may be experiencing, and be able to like deal with that and work within those circumstances. So I know that that's one of the things that is bubbling up during their response to the coronavirus, how different elected officials, not only here in the US, but across the world, how they're reacting and helping manage people through the situation. In some ways, it's coaching societies to say, okay, this is what we need to do now. Just commit to um, staying safe, staying at home, and then just work on little by little um, restarting the economy and not letting that fear of, oh, I need to go to work now, sort of uh, dictate your or dictate how quickly we move in the eventual reopening
Hmm.
of our society.
I think what I wanted to come back to earlier is actually related to what you're talking about, which is self awareness. Because earlier I mentioned about being honest with myself and
Hmm.
understanding the flaws in the way that we rationalize things and using that to my advantage. And a lot of people can do this. And I mentioned like lying to myself. So I don't know if maybe lying to myself is the wrong phrase to use. Because what's really happening is, within the context of what I was using it, I was saying that I understand that I'm self aware enough to understand that just because I say I'm not attached to material possessions doesn't mean that it's true. But if I believe it, that becomes my reality, right? That's a
Hmm.
flaw in I don't know if it's a flaw in humans, but you can exploit that to your advantage because you can create your own reality as long as you're creating it for something that's beneficial for you. And I find that if I create that reality and it allows me to deal with stress, to cope with layoffs at work, to cope with the coronavirus, then it's a huge gain in approaching things that way. Even though at the end of the day, if I really think about it, I know that it's probably not 100% true. This reality that I've created, in a way, it's a lie, but it's a very useful lie. And you know, people lie to themselves all the time. Might as well
Hmm.
become aware of it and use it to your advantage. Don't use it for bad stuff. Try to use it for a positive thing. That's the point that I wanted to get across earlier when I was talking about. We got into the whole thing of material possessions, and then you're talking about self awareness. So it's all these things are interrelated, and um, even how you were talking about spirituality and about what you believe in. See, here's the other angle to this that I think I have when I talk about these things. Absolutely nothing is set in stone for me, like
Hmm.
nothing. So like talking about absolutes and saying that you believe in something, or even coming across someone that says that they've reached total 100% spirituality or nirvana, I always call BS on that. I say, well, yeah, you've reached it within a within certain constraints. You've reached nirvana based on like the parameters of your life. But I can
Hmm.
introduce a whole bunch of other situations in which I bet that you would lose a lot of that stuff and revert back to this primitive self. In my mind, the human, because see, I think that these guys that are spiritual, these guys that meditate, even the Buddha and all of them, I think
Hmm.
they've just created a reality around themselves, right?
You mean the Dalai
Dalai
Lama?
Lama, yeah, they're doing exactly what I do. They've just created a different reality that allows them to live a life a certain way. But if you present them with enough of other types of situations that are maybe new to them, that they didn't anticipate, that make their life difficult, there's plenty of stuff, man. It's unlimited. You can make them break out of whatever it is that they think that they believed. Like, if anybody holds the idea that they've somehow changed permanently and that they're a certain way, they're gonna be in for a rude awakening at some point. And with
Hmm.
me, I'm very fluid like that. That I think I've already come to that realization that nothing is permanent. So however I feel today, I'm not gonna pretend like it's an absolute. It could change tomorrow, and that's part of the whole philosophy of just being honest with yourself and understanding at a deep level that spirituality and whatever other techniques you have for coping with life, that's just exactly what they are, coping with life. But nobody really knows exactly what it is that they're coping with because nobody
Hmm.
can tell you what life is.
That's true. And let me ask you this: how do you reconcile that realization with your value of consistency
Value of consistency in what regard?
and sort of and consistency in being or acting?
It's very simple. I think it's for me, it's not even that hard. So I don't necessarily know where I'm going, and I know all the flaws that we carry with us, but I just operate in the way that, well, I'm here today, so whoever's around me, I probably should treat them the way that I would want them to treat me. So
Hmm.
that gives me a lot of consistency to not to not to diverge too far from what I think is the right thing that I should do, even though I don't know if that's the right thing. I mean, who's to say that the right thing to do is to treat other people the way that you want to be treated? I mean, we say that because we think it's a good thing for society, but
This
is
is the
it
golden rule.
right? But why, right? I mean, there's no definitive rule that says how humans should live or how we should interact. Well, see, that's the problem that you get into when you don't have a a central guiding principle that's given to you like religion does. Because once you get outside of religion and nobody's telling you exactly how to confront these things, you can go anywhere, and you can believe anything, right? And like me, I believe that the best way for me to live in harmony with other people is to treat them like I would want them to treat me. So
Hmm.
that in itself tells me that I don't really need religion or anything else to tell me that, because that's a very simple rule. But at the same time, I can question that and tell myself, I don't even know if that's the right thing to do or not, because I don't even know what right or wrong is. And if I think about that long enough, like, people could go crazy thinking about that stuff. And for a lot of people, it's really scary to step outside and to try to figure these things out on their own. It's way more
Hmm.
comforting for someone, to believe that there is a creator that has a plan for you and that
Hmm.
everything has a purpose. Are we still on the same page, or did I just go off on a weird tangent?
No, I think we're on the same page. I think the perspective too is that oftentimes our because we really don't have a choice in terms of what religious tradition we're born into, right? So we were born into Catholicism, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or whatever it is that your family, your community believes, and that and eventually you have an option, right? You continue to embrace that, you continue to grow, and then you learn about other practices and traditions, and then you kind of figure out what to what to keep and what to add.
Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, I think that you become, you develop your own philosophy and your own understanding of life and how to proceed in life. And the reality is that religion, in some ways, is a philosophy, a construct, a social construct that helps people act a certain way or set some expectations,
Mm-hmm.
understanding that even within that, there's people who do are hypocritical and don't some people who say who are Christians and then they're racist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And or hit their wives or
Yeah.
do all these things that are not supposed to be done because of the commandments and whatever the tenets of your religion are. But if you look across the board, for the most part, a lot of religious and philosophies are the basic go back to that basic tenet that you talked about. Just be a good person, like be a decent person. If somebody's in help and need, help them. If somebody hurts you, don't try not to hurt them back unless you feel that it's necessary, right? Or I think there's a lot of things that then a lot of stuff that eventually comes down to just um being, right? So just being human and being healthy, balanced
Mm-hmm.
individuals who can react accordingly depending on the situation.
Yeah, and in regards to what you're saying about religious people, some of the most hypocritical people that I've ever met are religious people, because they're in a tough situation. They like you said, some some religious philosophy has been inculcated into them since they were kids, and they follow it, but they can't untether themselves from it. Yet they have all these contradictions, and but they're not able to realize what's happening to them. It's like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense. I'm living this life supposedly based on these operating principles, yet I violate them on a daily basis. Maybe I shouldn't torment myself, because I know there's a lot of religious people, when they do stuff that they're not supposed to, they feel guilty. They torment
Hmm.
themselves because their religion is telling them that they shouldn't do that stuff. And I think because I grew up in a religious household, it allows you to see a lot of those hypocrisies early on, and that's part of the learning process. And a lot of people, I'm not the only guy that, or the only person that has decided to just step away a little bit and detach from religion, because we grew up in that environment, and
Hmm.
when we saw firsthand, and just using an analytical mind, we understood that there's way too many contradictions here, and this and all these contradictions for what? So that I can live a life that, if I take the Bible and the Ten Commandments, I can condense them into one simple rule: treat everyone else the way I want to be treated. That's pretty much it. Like, look at the Ten Commandments, right? Thou shalt not commit adultery. Well, what does that say? Well, If you don't want your neighbor to come and like try to have sex with your wife, then don't do that same thing either.
Hmm.
Thou shalt not kill. Well, if you don't want somebody to kill you, you probably shouldn't kill them either. Like all those, you can condense them into one. Just don't do what you wouldn't want somebody else to do to you.
Exactly.
And to me, it's just very simple. I don't need a whole religion to tell me that. But I think I've said this before. But I understand that people need religion, and it provides value and meaning to a lot of people that need it. I'm just saying that in my case, I felt that I no longer needed that guidance that religion provides, or even the guidance that a spiritual life provides. But maybe when we talk about spirituality and self-awareness, we might be talking about the same thing. We just classify them as different stuff. That's how I feel.
Yeah, and it's almost like there's different ways to get to the same outcome for the most part. So I think some people go through a very different journey, and I think that's why, and I think just acknowledging the fact that sometimes it can be difficult. There's a lot of things that come up in questioning the religion that you grew up with, the practices that you grew up with. I think there's a lot of fear, right? Like, oh, what happens if you've been taught to believe something and all of a sudden you don't believe in that, right? Or you don't believe that there's a God, right? And how does that impact how you see yourself, how your mom and parents are going to see you, because you are saying and believing something that's completely the opposite or very different from what were up to believe. So I think there's a lot of things that come with that spiritual exploration and growth. And to your point, I think sometimes going back to the concept of believing your own reality, people decide this is my reality, this is gonna be my life, so I'm just gonna build it and live in it and be comfortable with that. And then
Hmm.
obviously at the end of life, we'll find out who's right.
Well, there's no such thing. I don't think you can. See, that's the thing. You're looking for an answer, and I'm not, because
You don't think there's answers?
no, there's no answers, because there's no look. Even even the stuff like what it means to live a good life. Well, you're just defining that based on some set of parameters that were given to you, and that are limited to like the planet that we live on. For example, if you live a good life, that means, again, don't kill, don't do all these other things. Well, all you're saying is don't hurt other humans. But what about animals? Are you still gonna hurt animals because we're gonna kill them to eat them? So does living a good life mean that you should also not hurt animals? Well, if you hurt animals, then you're making a distinction, right? You're just saying, well, human beings are holy and sacred because we're humans, and animals are different, so we can kill them as long as
Hmm.
we're thankful for killing them and eating them. You see, people make that distinction to justify why they think it's good to eat animals. Well, I don't make that distinction. I don't consider humans any different than animals. So I should feel as bad about killing a human as I do about killing a cow to eat it, but I don't,
Hmm.
because I make a reality that makes me be okay with that. But why is it okay to kill animals and eat them? I mean, the fact that we're saying be a good human. See, that here's the problem with life. By definition, if you're gonna stay alive, you're probably going to destroy other life. You're gonna either eat vegetables, eat animals, eat something else. You're destroying other life, and it's just a matter of rationalizing whether or not you're okay with it. Some vegetarians have come to the conclusion that no, it's not okay to
Hmm.
eat other animals. So they only eat like vegetables and other stuff. But in a sense, they're still eating vegetables. They're still killing plants. They just they made an arbitrary decision to say we the cutoff line for us is at animals, but we're okay destroying other life, and they've rationalized it one way or another. But all they've done is rationalized it. They don't have the right answer. Just the same way that carnivores don't have the right answer as to what's the best way to stay alive. Like, who has the right answer? There is no right answer. That's the problem. If you want to survive, you have to eat something else. And so it's virtually impossible to to stay alive and not harm something else, right? So then what is the right answer?
Yeah, but I think to your point, I think there's a different philosophy as to, for instance, how native people treated and were with the land. Yes, they killed and they had their practices
But that's
to
just
be thankful.
rationalizing it. They're just rationalizing it
Huh?
that way.
Yeah, they rationalize it, but they also in some way it's consistent with the circle of life. And to your point, it is life. It is about that. It is about
But even
life and death. There are species that are built on eating other
but
species, and and
even
there's a
the
whole food
sorry
chain.
sorry because even the circle of life thing is it doesn't make any sense.
Circle of life.
Because
Lion King.
even that can be taken apart because all that they're doing is they're trying to live life within a certain balance so that they don't run out of food. Because
Yeah,
if they exploit the environment and they chop down all the trees and they kill all the animals, you know what's gonna happen? They're gonna
no
die
food.
themselves too, probably, and then
Yeah,
they're just gonna make room for more life. So it's a bigger circle of life. You don't necessarily have to have the circle of life where you're sustainable, because if you destroy everything in your environment, a new life form, a new cycle will come about. And who's
yeah.
to say that that new cycle wasn't the right thing to do? Does that make sense to you?
Well, it's a different cycle,
Yeah,
and it
but
won't be. And I think that's the kind of cycle that we're talking about as we talk about climate change, right? Like, what
right.
kind of Earth do we want to
Yeah.
leave for our kids and grandkids and for the next generations? And I know one spiritual practice or one principle within native culture is thinking about 6 to 7 generations from now. And to
Mm-hmm.
your point, like, yes, there's probably things that are going to be totally different, but at the same time, like, if we know that we need trees, that we need to protect the Amazon, that we need to have
Mm-hmm.
better farming and animal raising practices, that we need to be healthier ourselves, like, why not try to preserve those, which I know is not what you're not saying, but and to your point, yes, I mean, there might be a time where, like, humans completely destroy Earth, and then we just decide we figure out how to live, right? We'll have the technology. We'll probably at that point be in other planets, but it will be a very different reality from what the previous one.
But
But ultimately, and I guess what it gets down to the the motive of incentive, right? Of self motive, of self preservation. And I think that a lot of that is what fuels our decisions.
and you brought up climate change, and climate change. You said it yourself. We have to think 5, 6, 7, 10 generations into the future. But even that, you see what we're doing. We're just thinking about ourselves, our survival. What if we don't take care of our planet and we destroy it and we kill ourselves, we kill all the animals, and then we leave the planet to the bacteria? That's still a
Hmm.
life form. It's still alive.
Yeah.
It's still going. So then you see everything that humans do is incredibly selfish towards us because we think that we are the important ones. And I
Hmm.
understand. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying I think about those things. And what if we're not right? What if we're not the most important species on this planet? Then does it make sense that we should try to preserve the planet? Because by preserving the planet, we're preserving it for ourselves and taking it away from everyone else. But if we don't preserve it, then once we destroy each other, something else is going to inherit the planet. And maybe
Hmm.
that's the right answer. How come nobody says that that could be the right answer? Oh well, because that's like, are you advocating mass genocide for humans? No, I'm not. I'm just like questioning these. I'm questioning the guiding principle where people operate. Everybody has everyone's anchored to a certain point of view and spirituality and a certain interpretation of life. I don't like
Hmm.
to be anchored to that. I like to like step away from that and just think about some other stuff. I'm not advocating for anything. I'm just like, thinking about these things.
No, yeah, and I mean, extinction is a real thing. It happened to the dinosaurs. It could happen to us because we never know if one of these days we get hit by a meteoroid, or there's a massive um, change um, in Earth's
Are you talking about
core.
the magnetic field? You mean if it like
Yeah,
switches and
magnetic field that makes things. So I mean, all of that stuff can happen, and there's a point. I think when you think about it, like we may be a speck in in the world's evolution, right? Um, so yeah, so I think it's interesting because what you're saying is completely true. But in the meantime, we do need to kind of give this life a meaning, give this life a purpose. Or at least I feel that I need to give uh, my life a meaning, a purpose, because ultimately, you know, when by that time that scenario that you're that you propose, which is realistic, happens, I'll probably be long gone, right?
yeah, but what about this? And what if you make your reality the reality that you're gonna derive satisfaction from making sure that the bacteria on this planet survives, and you convince yourself of that,
Hmm.
right? Now you're adding value to your life. You're adding meaning to it. It's no different than somebody else adding meaning to their life by trying to live a life as best as they think they should live it within the parameters of being a human. Like I said, anybody can create their own reality. The only reason why our realities are very similar as human beings is because we have the same set of challenges. We need to eat, we need to find a mate, and we need to reproduce. But we don't know why. We just need we know we have to do those things. Well, we know why we have to eat. Because if we don't eat, we die. But we don't know why it is that we want to avoid dying. We just know that we have to keep on living. Something within
Hmm.
us tells us that, and we just take it as an absolute truth that it needs to happen. So our reality is grounded on that. But there's other realities. Like, what if somebody said, um, you know, my reality is a reality that says that it's probably better if I don't eat and if I don't have kids,
Hmm.
and I derive satisfaction from that. Then who's to say that that person is wrong? Like it's so objective, especially if you're not. I mean, we get into like gray area here as well, but as I suppose people say, as long as you're not hurting anyone else. Well, you might not be hurting anyone else. You could be hurting other things, but right. So, see, I don't have an answer. Earlier you said earlier you made the statement about what's right or what's good, and that's why I just like I kept poking at that to try to at least tell you my point of view that is completely subjective. There is no right or wrong except what we make of it and what a society makes of it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know if this is where you thought the conversation was gonna go. Sorry.
No, it wasn't, but obviously it's a deep conversation.
Why don't we
Um,
take why don't we take it towards where you wanted to take it? I think I go off on too many tangents sometimes. Was there something specifically that you wanted to arrive at some point that we didn't?
no, not necessarily. And I think for me, I don't think from my perspective, I didn't want it to arrive at like, oh, this is the ultimate conclusion. So I do appreciate the the conversation and the perspective that you bringing in, because it's different from mine. Yeah, it's different. Obviously, I think it brings like these big ideas, philosophical questions, physics questions, right? Like I feel that there's so much to unpack, and so many answers that you and I cannot even get to. Um, I know so many answers that a lot of human people across time and history have tried to figure out, and and obviously there's people who are living in that space, and some people who are living in the day to day, and who just want to live in the moment and enjoy the taste, smells, and pleasures of life, and obviously others who decide to be more spiritual and all these things. But I think that's, to me, is just the beauty of the human experience. Um,
Tell me about your meditation, because I think that's where I you were talking about that, and then I think I started going in a different direction. But tell me about your meditative techniques.
well, I think that now I've been using an app, which is helpful. I think it's just kind of to be able to do it consistently, daily, at least 10 minutes a day. And it's something that actually that I know that I saw a video that Kobe Bryant did with Ariana Huffington.
Mm-hmm.
And, even Kobe as a competitor, right? He practiced meditation. So there's this thing, and I feel like even before getting to this point, I always heard meditation is what you need to do. You need to quiet your mind. You need to be aware, self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's hard to do, right? It's kind of like one of those things that is not necessarily enjoyable, but I think having a way to start practicing that it's helpful. It's been helpful to me, but I think it's also a realization that you can have a mindful moment anywhere, right? You can be doing yard work and realize, oh wow, this is cool. Like I'm here, I'm experiencing, I'm fully in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so much of what meditation is about being in the present, right? It's about just feeling what you're feeling, uh, feeling how you feel, not trying to do anything about it, but just being in the moment and appreciating the moment and not thinking about the future, not thinking about the past, not
What?
thinking about your neighbor, but just being who you are. And for me, is this kind of weird because I feel like so much of my perspective has been I want to get to the next level. I need to do something. I need to
Mm-hmm.
progress. I need to be doing something in order to feel like having a meaningful life. But then there's this thing of just just like be in the moment, be in the present, and just in those few minutes, just I don't know, just try to quiet your mind and be fully aware. So I think that's something that I know that I'm intrigued by and that I'm appreciating. And then there's the other, in some ways, I think religion, right? Going to mass, I think it's supposed to be at least Catholic mass. And I know for me, one of the unfortunate, I guess I haven't gone to mass in a while, and obviously now we can't go to mass because of the coronavirus.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are times when mass is that spiritual experience, and obviously they have rituals, they have meaning, but
Mm-hmm.
ultimately it's meant to help you think through what you're living. And then there's sweat lodge, and then the breathing exercising that I did early this morning, which they help you through your breathing.
Mm-hmm.
They help kind of just bring you to the moment, surface any emotions and things that you need to address, and that sort of helps you offload, and then it helps you become I don't know, it feels rejuvenating. That's the feeling I get with sweat lodges, which you go in the sweat lodge, there's a lot of symbolism, and then when you come out of it, you're supposed to just be you feel lighter
Mm-hmm.
because you've been able to process and leave behind a lot of the things that may be going on. So I know that that's something that I'm appreciating more about my spiritual practice now.
And what about the app that you mentioned earlier? How does the app help you with the meditation process?
I think the app just helps because it's they have a whole program and they have a narrator,
Mm-hmm.
and they just kind of help you. Okay, sit down,
Ah, I got you.
notice your breathing. So they kind of give you technique. It's kind of like a coach telling you what to do, which helps you enter into that space. And obviously, because it's on my phone, I get reminders. They show videos. They kind of explain concepts, and so there's that helpfulness that you get. If you go to yoga or you practice transcendental meditation and other things out there.
And the ultimate goal being that you want to arrive at a more relaxed state, to arrive at a way of having a different outlook on life, of coping with things. What do you think is the goal? What do you strive to get out of the meditation? Like you said to enjoy the moment, but then beyond that, what else?
Yeah, I think a combination of those things. I think it is being in the moment, but I think a lot of it is processing, right? Like acknowledging things, like why am I feeling this way? Why does my body feel this way? Is it because I'm not taking care of it? Is it because I'm doing X, Y, Z? And it's almost like a reset opportunity, right? Because if you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling a certain way, if your body is feeling a certain way, then you kind of have an option to say, okay, I'm feeling this way. Why? Let me figure it out. Let me find a way to address this so that I can continue to be a healthier, so I can be a healthier person.
And this is something that you've talked about, the sweat lodges before. That's something that you, I know you started doing them maybe a few years ago, but are you doing them more often now, or about the same as before?
Well, before coronavirus, we were doing it. I was doing it about monthly, um, and then they also have other gatherings in between the monthly community sweat lodge. You know, they have one for women. They actually just recently had started one for men, understanding that they need a space as well, and then they have other celebrations. But I think it's again is it, I've when I was doing them consistently, it's kind of like that process of you go there, you pray, you meditate, you connect with people, and you just feel better about yourself. I mean, you think things through, you get some wisdom from others, whether it's the person leading the sweat lodge or other people who are struggling with things. You also pray for people, right? And you realize that,
Mm-hmm.
oh shit, I thought I had issues. This person is dealing with
Yeah.
cancer, or
Mm-hmm.
their daughter just passed away, or
Right.
all of this stuff. So like it's almost like a therapy session, I guess, too.
Yeah. And so when you're able to tap into these realizations and these perspectives as you're going through this meditative process, you know that you're doing it because you're able, like you said, you're able to realize like, oh man, like all these other people have even bigger problems than the ones that I thought I had. What happens when you're not doing the meditation? Like it sounds like you're not actively thinking about those things. So do you just revert to a different state where what is your mind preoccupied with the rest of the time that you're not meditating?
Yeah, I mean I think that's one of the reasons why I feel what's happening with coronavirus is an opportunity for us to be more mindful. I think normally what happens is that you're worried about all the work that you need to do, all the things that you need to do, all the errands, people you
Mm-hmm.
haven't talked to. There's all these distractions. Obviously, there's music, there's Netflix shows, there's sports. So I feel like in modern society, there's so many distractions that don't allow you to be just you, your thoughts, and your emotions, and be able to process things, right? Things that happen to you, things that happen to others.
But
Um,
when you're watching a movie, you're turning off that part of your mind that is also making you like self-aware and striving for like introspection. It's like if so you could be watching Netflix movies on Netflix, but you could be taking really hard, really beneficial lessons from the content that you're watching on Netflix, regardless of
yeah,
what it is,
absolutely. Yeah.
right? I guess what I'm trying to get at is because again, for me, like I told you, I've never felt the need to go the route of meditation. And I'll be honest and say that I'm probably wrong on that. There's benefit to get from it. And I don't think it's an arrogance on my part to say that I don't think there's anything that I can derive from spirituality. I think it's just because of everything that we were talking about in this podcast, I've come to the realization that if if I need to do something, arrive at some state of mind, I feel like I have to do that myself. So I've
Hmm.
never given myself the opportunity to look at other tools because I'm not very trustworthy when it comes to other things that provide I'll put this in air quotes, like some type of solution, right? And And maybe that's because of my insecurity or my fear of growing up in a religious household where religion
Mhm.
was the answer, and then I turned away from that because I knew that that was not the answer. So I'm very skeptical of anything
Mhm.
else that presents itself as helping you in some way to arrive at some, because I figure I'll just do it myself. Like I don't need that other thing. I could just arrive at that myself. And so again, that's probably the wrong way of looking at it, because I'm sure there is value in like the sweat lodges. There's value in the things that you go through. But then the reason why I'm asking you also about your process is because I'm generally curious as to like how it is that you transition into that state, and then afterwards you seem to transition out of it. Because for someone like myself, I'm always in that state. Like I
Mhm.
don't think a day goes by that I don't see someone else or that I don't see something, and I keep reminding myself how fortunate I am that that I have it better than someone else. I have I have like chronic lower back pain, and I've had it for like the last 10 years. So I can't sit for too long because I start getting like a muscle pain. Obviously, it's not terrible, but it's like it's ever present. It's always there.
Mhm.
And one of the ways that I just cope with it is I say, well, I have to exercise, and life is shitty. It sucks. Sometimes you end up with chronic pain, and there's like millions of people out there that with chronic pain that have it even worse than me. They can't even walk, right? And then I also say, well, there's also a ton of people that don't have it, and it must be nice not to have it. And then I tell myself, yeah, it is nice not to have it, because when I didn't have it, I didn't even think about it, right? I didn't even know what it was like to have this type of chronic pain. Um, and so every single day I have to go through that, and every single day I have to figure out a way to be okay with it. And I seem to be okay with it, just coming to terms with the realization that life is in some way or another, life is really crappy, and I have some privileges and some advantages in some areas, and I don't in others. And that's
Mhm.
the truth for everyone else. And I don't think it's because of like this like lower back pain that I get that I'm able to feel like I'm always in that state of mind, because I've always been, even before that I've always been like that. But to me, the idea that you go into some space where you're meditating and you're trying to get in touch with yourself, and you're trying to think about stuff, and then once you leave that space you go somewhere else, that to me is really foreign, because I don't have those type of switches. I'm always just in one place. And so in a way I think I'm always doing meditation 24/7. I mean, I
Yeah,
think that's what I'm trying to say.
and it sounds like it is, but I think it's also the level of intensity, I think, that changes when you do something more focused than not. But to your point, I think that, I had my fair share of skepticism when um, I was first introduced to sweat lodges, right? And I think
Hmm.
part of that was the racist um, indoctrination from the Catholic Church, that and the Spanish conquistadors, and like seeing native practices as evil, the devil worshiping,
Right.
like, so there's that natural thing. But then also skeptic because I like I've said, I also don't believe in somebody can just present you with like a magic cure. But I was open to it, so I was
Hmm.
open to that. I'm open now to meditation. So I think that, and even meditation and some of the other things that I've done, like I'm skeptic, but I still try them just to see, just to give them a try and see how I felt. And then from that, realizing that they are like anything else in life, they're just tools
Hmm.
that help you with whatever it is that you need help with, similar to going to the gym, or like they just kind of help you think about things in a different way. I think there are people who have experience, or who just have a natural ability to be like you, right? Somebody who can process things, somebody who can ask good questions, somebody who can become a therapist, right? And help you process things that maybe you haven't fully processed or understood. So I think I just see it as a tool, as tools that have helped me better understand myself and my experience. And to your point, we're not all perfect, and we're not supposed to be perfect. And I think it's just kind of I feel that these tools, being um, more aware of myself, it's helping me grow.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, it's just helping me grow at many different levels.
Just to put it out there, it's not like I'm not someone that closes myself off to these other alternatives because I have tried yoga. I've done yoga before. I've done meditation. I tried Pilates at some point. I'm open to trying new things, like if just to try it for the sake of it. I don't know anyone that does sweat lodges, and it's not something that I came across on my own, so I've never done it. But if you were to say, hey, let's go check this out some weekend, I'd be like, yeah, let's go see it, let's go do it, and I'd probably be okay with doing it and experiencing it. I'm not saying that I'm closing off myself to those experiences. I'm just knowing myself. I'm gonna go in there and I'm going to get into a mental state no different than the mental state that I get into in the mornings when I wake up, or those 5 minutes before from when I open my eyes before I wake up, or the 10 minutes before when I lay down before I go to sleep. There's absolutely nothing that I'm gonna be able to think that I haven't thought about already in some other, or that I don't think about throughout the course of a day, reading, watching a movie, or doing other stuff. That I think that's one of the reasons why I always forget stuff when I have stuff in my mind, in my hand, because I'm always thinking about these other stuff. Like even when I
Hmm.
talk to someone else, like when you talk to someone else, are you just having a conversation with them, or are you like having a conversation with them and then having a conversation with yourself, and then also trying to understand what they're saying and where they're coming from? Do you do any of that? Because I do
Yeah,
that
all of
a
that. And
lot.
sometimes you get distracted, and sometimes you kind of get thinking, oh, like, or you notice something about their physical appearance, or you
No, but I'm
notice
not.
somebody else.
Yeah, that's ever present. But let's say you're having a conversation with someone, and you say something, and now the other person is saying something else. Now, if the person is lying to you and they're trying to get you to do something that you don't want, right? Then that's a red flag, and you're gonna analyze right away what it is that they're saying. You're gonna say, well, why is that person saying this? What do they want
Hmm.
me to do? Are they trying to get me into trouble? Or do they want to take advantage of me? Like when you go to a dealer, right, and the guy's selling you a car, you're always trying to put yourself or get into their head to see what they're thinking, how they're trying to sell you a car, they're trying to take advantage of you and stuff like that. Well, that same process that you would go through in those extreme situations where it's pretty obvious that you need to try to analyze what somebody else is doing, I do that with every single conversation, even if it's just a regular casual conversation. I think, oh, I said this. Now this person is saying that, but are they saying that because are they saying that? Are they agreeing with me
Wow.
because they're being nice, or are they disagreeing because they're nervous, or is it because they're uncomfortable? So I said something that may be uncomfortable, but now they don't know how to react, so they're trying to say this. And so should I say
So
something?
then you try, yeah, then
Yeah,
you
should
try
I
to
say
address
something
it.
to compliment them, or should I say something, or should I change the topic, or should I just go along? And then it's like this dance, right? But I'm sure a lot of people do that, but I do that all the time with everything. I even question
Yeah.
what I'm saying all the time. So, uh,
No, yeah, yeah, I definitely done that, and I do that in whether it's in the work context or like in personal, like at a party, having a good time. And there's times where you just get to a point where, this is what I'm saying,
hmm
take it however you're gonna take it. Like, people then go back, like at some point that you kind of just, when you get to that point where you don't care what other people think,
hmm
particularly if it's a good friend, or you're having a good conversation and you feel there's a safe space, that you kind of almost forget. It's almost like the other person becomes that voice in your head versus you having three voices going on at the same time. And I think sometimes getting to that space, I think, is a wonderful place to be, where you're just having a conversation, saying things that you are thinking. And to your point, maybe you're saying this right now because that's your truth, and then that person questions that truth because they have a different perspective on that,
hmm
and you kind of explore it together. But I think oftentimes that I appreciate those types of conversations where you kind of let go and just do it, and then people are going to react how they react, and then sometimes you realize, okay, this is not the this conversation is not going to a good place. Let me sort of make a joke, do something else, bring somebody else in the conversation, or excuse myself to go somewhere.
Yeah, I have to do that a lot because a lot of the times, the type of conversations that I want to have, um, it's not necessarily that they're not entertaining, but they if you're at a party and you're having a good time, the last thing you want to talk about is existentialism or like all these other things that we were talking about today. It's just better
Yeah.
to just keep it light, keep the levity in the situation and have a good time. And what was I gonna say? See, I forgot what I was gonna say now. It must have been a lie, dijo George Lopez. If you forget what you're gonna say,
That's true.
yeah. Just the caveat, or just I, I don't know if we're gonna wrap up the conversation, but just in case we're
I think
wrapping
we
it up,
should.
um, keep in mind what I said in the beginning. So I'm full of BS when it comes to a lot of stuff because I know that what I'm saying, I know that what I'm saying is just a reality that I've manufactured, and I incorporate a lot of ideas from other people all the time. There's like I don't hold anything to be my absolute truth.
Hmm.
At any given time, I pick up ideas from other people and I incorporate them in such a way and then it guides how I think about stuff. But everything that I've just said here, it's my reality to some extent until something happens and then my reality changes, right?
Hmm.
So don't hold me to anything that I've said in the sense that it's not permanent. I'm also this like entity that's going through life and I don't know what the hell's happening and I'm trying to learn and I'm trying to grow and I'm trying to develop. I look at the traditional ways that are out there and I try to see if there's other ways to also grow and to challenge myself and to think. But my reality is very fluid. As long as it doesn't hurt somebody else, and as long as I keep treating other people the way that I want to be treated, I get to think whatever I want, right?
Hmm.
So that's just the cap. Just to put that out there because I don't want to send the wrong message about in case I touched on some topics there that could be deemed sensitive for some people.
I think I'm there with you, Romero. I'm there with you. And I think this is one of the both the exciting and scary things about doing a podcast and recording these types of conversations because we don't know how people are going to perceive these conversations and what we're saying. But I think to your point, this is part of the one of the reasons why we are doing it is to help us evolve and feel comfortable and speak our truth, right? Speak our truth and our perspective and encourage others to do the same. So,
Yep, sounds good. Sounds good. You're good leaving it at that.
yes, sir.
All right. How is our Instagram page doing? Do you want to bring it up, or are we still working on it?
We're still working on it, but follow us on Instagram from Perspective Now.
And,
Danos like.
and if they have any questions, if they would like us to maybe dive a little deeper into some of the topics that we touched on, then send us an email too. We have brownperspectivenow@gmail.com.
That's right.
That's what it is. Yeah. All right. Sounds good, man.
All right, Romero.
Nos vemos.
Cuídate, que la plaza es bueno.